thegearnetwork.com.
The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network.
I believe it's a big challenge for our building to keep things in perspective and to, if we're going to get addicted to anything, let's get addicted to the process.
And with that, we welcome you to Trust the Podcast, powered by Better Live Than Dead and the Gear Radio Network. This is episode number 55.
5-5. What's up?
Week 11, Buffalo Bills at the Miami Dolphins. You can hear this podcast on BetterLiveThanDead.com, the new GearNetwork.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, YouTube. Wherever you get your podcast, you can get this and all the Better Live Than Dead and all the Gear Radio Network podcasts. I am Ryan Wolfe at Wolfe BLTD, and if you haven't guessed by now, joining me on the IndyCar Media Hotline, Trust the Podcast is going BLTD style today. I've got Mr. Perez on the line at MRLG Perez. Lewis, how you doing today?
Yo, you know what, man? I'm doing really, really well. I got some really good news today that I can't really talk about right now, but I'm doing excellent, sir.
Well, the good news is we've actually done two podcasts today. We recorded the BLTD podcast earlier today, and now it's the evening, and we're doing Trust the Podcast just so we can get some good content rolling out before this weekend's game with the Buffalo Bills.
But that makes it a great evening.
Absolutely. I agree with that one. Hey, Buffalo gets back on track against the streaking Miami Dolphins. I only say that tongue-in-cheek. They won 2 straight, whatever. A 37-20 victory, Lewis. They moved to 7-3 on the season for the first time since 1999. Now, I know if John was here, he would yell at me because I'm at the point now where instead of looking at the big picture where I said, they won, but it's just at this point where it's a week-by-week basis. A win is a win no matter the opponent. Each win gets the Bills a step closer to a potential playoff berth. So I'm very pleased with the 37-20 victory over the Miami Dolphins.
Well, you know what? Listen, if you listen to BLTD, I've been saying it all year. The Buffalo Bills, in my opinion, are a playoff team. They have a stellar defense. Their defense is great. I still think there's question marks on their offense, and I do believe, like I've said, there's games that they should have lost, but they've eked out a victory. So you know what? If you're going by just, record alone, then good for the Buffalo Bills. If you live in upstate New York, this is what you want to see. It makes things exciting. So I'm not a Bills fan, but I'm happy for the Buffalo Bills and their fans. It's
Absolutely.
been fun.
And you mentioned the offense, and that's where we're going to start our 3 big things this week, because the offense, they actually have an offense this week. It showed up. It was great. Buffalo had the perfect opportunity this week, Lewis, to try new things against a not so great Dolphins squad. And Josh Allen took that and ran with it. Josh Allen was 21 for 33, 256 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. He also had 7 rushes for 56 yards and a touchdown. He had crisp passes, was making smart decisions. He also excelled when the offense increased the pace. It seems like this week they were focusing more on getting out of the huddle and snapping the ball, or even straight up just going no huddle. Also for his week, Josh Allen was named the AFC Offensive Player of the Week. Also offensively, Devin Singletary, again, he's being featured as the feature back despite the fact he's splitting carries with Frank Gore. He had 15 carries for 75 yards, 1 reception for 4 yards. He did have 2 fumbles, though. They do raise a cause for concern. Also, John Brown, 9 receptions for 137 yards and 2 touchdowns. He continues to look like a steal and a number 1 wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills.
Absolutely. I'm excited to see, what this quarterback's going to be able to do. For a long time, the Bills have struggled to find a good franchise quarterback, and it seems like they have a young one now who will be able to grow into the position and become a stud.
Did you just say a young woman?
No, I said a young quarterback.
I thought you said young woman. I was so confused.
No, I think I said a young one. A young one.
Okay.
I'm still getting over I'm still getting over a cold and a sinus infection and strep throat. So I might sound funny at sometimes.
You're okay. I just misheard you.
Yeah, he's definitely not a young woman, because that would be a huge step forward for the NFL.
Yeah, I agree there. Looking at the offense, though, Lewis,
the NFL's ready for that.
The 37 points were the most scored in a game this season for the Bills. Also, I wonder if this played a factor. We won't know until the Bills play against Denver this week, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Brian Daboll, the offensive coordinator, called the game from the booth for the first time all season. And I'm not sure if it was just because they played Miami, but that certainly seemed to make some sort of a difference.
Yeah, no, they looked a little more crisp. They looked a little more effective. They looked excellent. If they continue to go with that method, I'd be curious to see, exactly how it's going to play out. They looked like a good football team.
Which is wild to think. But I do want to mention one more thing before we move over to the defense. Ty Nsekhe, offensive lineman, left with an ankle injury. A Dolphins defender rolled up on Nseke's ankle. Did not look good at all. It was kind of gross to watch the replay. He left the game on a cart with an air cast on his ankle. Apparently, he's week to week. So it wasn't too devastating of an injury, but enough to keep him out week to week. He'll obviously miss Sunday's game against the Broncos. Now, Lewis, moving over to the defensive rebirth, our second of the three big things. Granted, again, like the offense, it was only one game. So clearly, it's one of those situations where you look at it and you think to yourself, yeah, it was great to see what they did, but you have to keep some perspective. But like I said, take it for what it's worth. Despite allowing 2 rushing touchdowns on Sunday, the Buffalo Bills rush defense had somewhat of a resurgence. They allowed only 23 yards on 13 carries. That's 1.8 yards per carry. And then they had 7 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, 3 pass deflections, 14 quarterback hits, and only allowed 13 defensive points, 7 points, which we'll talk about in a second, came on special teams. So, Lewis, the defense needed to have a bounce back after struggling recently with their run defense and then obviously just an overall ineffectiveness. But clearly, not only did the offense have a great comeback game on Sunday, but so did the defense, which is very good to get some momentum going with a tough stretch of games coming up.
Absolutely, they're going to need it because, like you said, they do have a tough stretch of games coming up, and I've been sold on their defense all season. I think they have an excellent defense. I'm a fan of their defense. I think that if they can continue to do what they did last week, then they're going to make it very difficult on teams to win, except for Thanksgiving when the Dallas Cowboys are going to actually torture them.
I had a feeling that was coming. Well, look, that's what I mentioned. That's why I mentioned it, because they've got Denver this weekend. They've got Dallas on Thanksgiving. They play Baltimore soon. They play New England soon. So the schedule is going to get a little tougher for them. And that defense has been struggling majorly. I guess I wouldn't say majorly, but enough to raise a little concern. So like I said, it's despite the fact that it was the Dolphins, take it for what it's worth. It was very good to see. They weren't able to. The weird thing for me is that they weren't able to put the game away. It always seemed like Miami was hanging around here, hanging around there,
right.
But they were still able. Again, end of the day, you don't get any extra points for style. You get a win, or you get a loss, or you get a tie. And they walked out with a win, and they move on to Denver next week.
And that's what matters. You got that W, and it looks good in that column. So you keep your march to possibly make the playoffs, and that's important.
2 things I want to point out on special teams. First off, Stephen Hauschka, credit where credit is due in that department. He was 3 for 3 this week, a 51, 34, and 21-yard field goal after going 0 for 2 last week, and a negative for the special teams. They allowed a 101-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. Miami's Jakeem Grant, the man who returned the touchdown, had 5 returns for 198 yards. Buffalo also allowed a surprise onside kick to be recovered. Seems like once the ball was kicked, they had no idea what was going on. So special teams can certainly be better. But again, it was a team potentially pulling out a bag of tricks to try to find any way they could to win. It was definitely a smart play on Miami's part, especially because their special teams coordinator, the Buffalo Bills' old special teams coordinator. So you've got a guy looking to potentially prove a point as well. So either way, the offense was good. The defense was good. Special teams definitely left a lot to be desired, but you just hope that in the coming weeks that improves itself.
Yeah, you can't do that in today's league. They've made it to where, recovering an onside kick is virtually impossible in today's game, especially this particular season.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the kicker was the one who recovered it.
I think he was, but which makes it even worse, by the way. It makes it even worse. So special teams does, they need to shape up, I should say. Not ship up, because that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, you can't allow stuff like that to happen.
It's kind of embarrassing.
It is very embarrassing. I would, if something like that had happened when I was playing sports back in high school, our coach would have ran us until we threw up. And then once we were done throwing up, he would have ran us some more until we were done throwing up.
Yeah, that's rough. But like I said, it's something in professional sports that you shouldn't have that much of a mental lapse. But hey, like I said, good play call on Miami's part for sure.
Absolutely. They saw a weakness and they capitalized on it.
Absolutely. They saw him laying back and they went for it. Why not? Moving on to our third of the three big things this week, Gore Watch. As we always do, Frank Gore rolled into Week 9, ranked fourth all-time in NFL history with 15,185 rushing yards. Barry Sanders is ranked third all-time with 15,269 rushing yards. You already know that from the past handful of podcasts. Gore was 72 yards behind Sanders heading into Week 9. Week 11, I should say heading into – I did that wrong. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I got my weeks all messed up here. He rolled into Week 10 because this was Week 11. So he was 72 yards behind Sanders heading into Week 10, and then Week 11. There we go. He had 11 rushes for 27 yards. After Week 11, Gore now has 15,224 rushing yards. Heading into Week 12, Gore is 45 yards behind Barry Sanders for third all-time in NFL history. Also, Frank Gore is 23 rushing attempts behind Curtis Martin, who has 3,518 for third most all-time. Frank Gore continues to do the damn thing, despite the fact that his productiveness has kind of dipped. He's still showing up to work and showing out a little.
Oh, he's still very much a serviceable running back. So he will definitely move into that spot before the end of the season on both stats. Good for Frank Gore.
He's one of the greatest of all time, I think. That's for sure.
See,
what have I
when
done?
it comes to saying he's one of the greatest of all time, maybe for me, because yes, he's going to pass Barry Sanders, but Barry Sanders retired before he should have. If he had not retired, and I'm a Cowboys fan, you know that, but if he had not retired, Emmett would not have the records he has now, because Barry would hold all those records. Barry Sanders was probably the greatest running back we've ever seen. And he retired before he should have.
I don't disagree there. Now, I want to look ahead here, brought to you by 26 Shirts. First off, as always, check out 26shirts.com, facebook.com/26shirts, at 26 Shirts on Twitter and Instagram. We always love the stuff that Dell and the guys do over at 26 Shirts. And again, we look forward to having Dell on the podcast sometime soon. I know our schedules have crossed and we have not been able to get a time hammered out. But we'll get together soon, I promise you all, and we'll talk about 26 Shirts, and we'll talk about the Buffalo Bills. But for now, Luis, I've got you on the podcast. We're talking about the Buffalo Bills, and we're talking about the playoff outlook. Now, after 11 weeks, the Buffalo Bills currently sit with the 5th seed in the AFC. Now, we'll say into Week 12 because we are doing this after the Thursday Night Football game, which Houston defeated Indianapolis. So right now, as of recording time, with that Thursday Night Football game in mind, according to 538.com, the Buffalo Bills currently hold a 72% chance of making the playoffs. Right now in the AFC, you've got New England, Baltimore, Houston, Kansas City, Buffalo, Oakland. That's your 1 through 6. If the season ended today, which obviously we know it does not, but if it did, Buffalo would head to Kansas City for a wild card weekend matchup. Also, Louis, Buffalo holds a 1-game lead over 6th. That's Oakland at 6-4, and a 2-game lead over 7th. That is Indianapolis at 6-5, but that will likely change here on Sunday. So, with that being said, before we head over to the Week 12 matchup, how are you feeling about the Buffalo Bills' playoff chances heading into Week 12?
I honestly think that the Buffalo Bills have an excellent chance to make the playoffs. I think they'll make it, and then depending upon who they face, I think they'll be out. Like if they were, like you said, if it was the end today, they'd be facing the Kansas City Chiefs. That would be like a thanks for coming.
Quite possibly, yeah.
So
Patrick Mahomes has not skipped
a
Patrick Mahomes has not skipped a beat. Future Hall of Famer Patrick Mahomes
Right.
has not skipped a beat since he came back.
Future Hall of Famer. Yeah, so, I think they'll make the playoffs. It'll be interesting to see how the rest of the season shakes out. But I definitely think they'll get there. I don't think they'll advance depending upon who they end up facing, but they'll get to the playoffs. I believe that.
I would, being a fan, I would say I'm on your side as well. But I think so. That you set yourself up well enough that it's going to take a lot to kick yourself out. But we will see in a big game. I know Denver's bad, or statistically they're bad, but at this point, every game is a big game. Week 12, the Buffalo Bills host the Denver Broncos. Denver a 3-7 record. Denver blew a 20-0 lead last Sunday, and Minnesota lost 27-23. How embarrassing does that have to be?
That's got to be extremely embarrassing. Sure, you were going up against Minnesota, and in Minnesota, if you guys listen to BLTD, I retracted my original pick for the AFC and went to Minnesota, although I might have to change that again, to be honest with you. But, to me, losing like that after you were up so big, that's hard to come back from. That's super embarrassing. So what you tend to want to do is the next game, you want to make a statement. Now, can they make that statement against the Buffalo Bills? Not really sure, because Denver's not as good as they used to be. So I think it'll be an interesting game. Is it in Buffalo or in Denver?
It's in Buffalo.
It's in Buffalo? Yeah,
Yes,
Buffalo has a very good chance to win that game.
I think so. Like we said, they're 3-7. Their quarterback right now, not Joe Flacco. He's injured with a disc issue in his back or his neck. Brandon Allen, who has 2 NFL starts both this season, a 49.2% completion percentage. One name to watch for, Cortland Sutton. He has 49 receptions, 805 yards, and 4 touchdowns on the season. One thing when looking at the Broncos defense, which is very good, mind you, they're allowing a 4th best 310.8 yards per game, and a 5th best 210.3 passing yards per game. But the one big name that you always mention when we talk about the Denver Broncos, Von Miller. He's struggling a little this season. He has 5 sacks, only 5 sacks. He's on pace for his first non-double-digit sack season since 2013, when he only played 9 games due to injury. So Von Miller taking a bit of a step back this season, but that Denver Broncos defense, it's still as advertised. It's still very difficult to play against.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. It's going to be – I think it'll be a good game. I think it'll be an entertaining game. I see Buffalo winning by maybe 3 points.
Okay, we'll get you down for that for sure. And then from there, I'm going to say it's probably going to be a fun game. That's all I'm going to say. I don't want to predict anything. I don't want to feel like a fool, looking like a fool with my pants at the ground. I just want to say hopefully the Bills win. I'm feeling good about this one, especially after last weekend's drubbing in Minnesota, or the blown game. First half of the game, I was like, oh man, Buffalo's got a real tough opponent next week. Denver's playing real hot. And then they came out lifeless in the second half and just lost it. So I would presume that the New Era Field crowd is going to be hot. It's supposed to not be a terrible day on Sunday, so maybe fans will be even more lit up. And I got my parents coming over. We're going to have some pizza and some boneless wings, which technically are just chicken nuggets, and some pierogies. So it's going to be a great Sunday for all parties involved.
Shoot, I might have to stop by and say hi.
The door is always open, and we have a couch now too.
Oh, nice.
And we have a new refrigerator.
Tell your parents I said hello.
I'm sure I don't even know if my parents listen to the podcast. I'm going to call them out. Mom and Dad, you're not listening to the podcast. If you are, text me and tell me I'm an asshole. There you go. Until like John. Until John like texts. Until John texts me and is like, I told your parents to call you an asshole, and then my cover's blown. But anyways, with that being said, I am actually going to go get ready to go out to dinner with my lovely wife. And Lewis, I know
your wife I said hi.
I will do that when she gets home. It's her last day at her current job. She's looking forward to bigger and better things. So we're going to go celebrate. But you go do what you got to do. I'll go do what I got to do. Buffalo Bills, you do what you got to do. As we always say, on every Better Live Than Dead podcast, whether it be this one or BLTD or the Sabercast. We are Trust the Podcast.
You're not.
We will catch you sometime very soon. Thanks again for tuning in. Again, I am at Wolf BLTD. Lewis is at MRLG Perez. Go Buffalo Bills. And as always, trust the podcast.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.